Hi everyone, welcome to the second video. In this section we're going to go back over entering data into an Excel worksheet. So as you can see, I've got Excel open here and I've got my home screen or my backstage screen, and I'm going to click on blank workbook, which is a way of creating a brand new blank workbook. So don't forget, in a brand new blank workbook you're always going to have at least one worksheet. It's called sheet 1 down here. We'll be seeing later on how to rename sheets. We've got the sheet split up into the columns at the top and rows down along at the side. So the current active cell is the cell that you're in or currently on. We can get to any active cell by simply left clicking once in it. We can also move around using the arrow keys. You can also press the tab key on your keyboard, which is the key beside the Q key, and that would bring you on one cell at a time on the same row. And if you hold down Shift and Tab, you will move backwards. So there's many different ways of moving around. I'm going to go back to cell A1, which is the Home tab, and I'm going to type in the following number, and then I'm going to press the Enter button on my keyboard. Now, depending on what kind of computer you're using, if you have a full-size keyboard, if you're using a desktop computer, then you probably have a keyboard with a numeric keypad over on the right-hand side, and they're laid out like a calculator or a cash register till. And I find them easier to use. If you don't have those, if you're using a laptop, you may not have a numeric keyboard. You're just going to have the keys at the top of the screen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. They'll do exactly the same thing. Similarly, you might have, if you have the numeric keypad, you're going to have a second enter key in the very bottom right-hand corner of the keyboard. And then your main enter key is going to be in the main block of keys. I sometimes call it the upside down L key. Both of those enter keys do exactly the same thing if you have both of them. So after you press enter, you'll see that we automatically go on to a new row in Excel. So we're now down in cell A2. I'm going to type in another number, press enter again, another number, and finally another number, and press enter. So that's the way it goes. As you type values into each cell, you'll notice that we move down automatically onto a new row. That's the default action. Now, something important to recognize here is that if I move back over the cells in which I've entered data, I'm using my up arrow key on the keyboard here to do that. If you look up here, you'll notice that the contents of the cell is appearing in this long bar here. And I made a reference to it in the first section in our introductory video. That's the formula bar. You can see the tooltip popping up telling me that it's the formula bar. And the formula bar can be used for a number of things. First of all, it can be used for putting in formulas or formulae, if you prefer. Now, we're not looking at that in this section, but when we do come to start entering in formulas, we can use it for doing that, or for editing formulas that already exist. But similarly, for any cell which has content in it, these 4 cells have numbers in them. You can see the contents of the cell displayed here, obviously where we've entered it, but also up here as well in the formula bar. So if I wanted to change the 4th number, I could do it up here in the formula bar by left clicking once, and you can see the cursor is now blinking, and I can delete the number that's there, and I can type in another number and press enter. That's one way of changing the contents of a cell. Second way of changing the contents of a cell is to simply double left click in the cell, and then I can move around or delete and type in the number that I want. The third way is to press, when you're on the cell that you want to edit, press the F2 key. The F2 key on your keyboard, you'll see a range of function keys, F1 through to F12, along the top of your keyboard. And if you press F2 when you're on a cell, the cursor will start blinking. Excel will allow you to start editing that cell. And again, I can type in whatever I want and press enter. So easy enough to do. Now, if I want to delete the contents of a cell, I have a number of options. I can left click on the cell that has the number that I want to delete, and I can simply press the delete key on my keyboard. Now, that's different from the backspace key. The backspace key looks like, it may be labeled on your keyboard, it may not be labeled backspace, but either way it should be above the main enter key, and it should look like a long arrow pointing to the left. That's your backspace key. Just going to undo that and show you the difference between backspacing and deleting. Very subtle difference. They'll both delete the contents of the cell. But if I'm on a cell and I want to just delete it and move on, I can simply press delete. If, however, I want to backspace, notice that the cursor remains blinking. So it's a very subtle difference, and not hugely an important one. So all you need to do to delete is to simply left click and delete the contents of your cell by either pressing delete or backspace. Something else that's very useful as well is that if I decide that I want to replace the contents of cell A1 with another number, I don't need to delete the number that's currently in there. When I'm on the cell, I simply start typing, and the contents of the cell will automatically be overwritten with what I type. So you don't need to delete before you're typing in the new contents. All you have to do is be on the cell and start to type, and the contents that are currently there will be erased and will be replaced with whatever you type. Naturally enough, you can go to any cell in the worksheet and type in anything you want in terms of numbers, and they'll be deleted. You don't have to go one under the other. Now that's typing in numbers, but what about text? Well, if I go over to the C column here, and if I type in my first name, you'll see that yes, you can absolutely type text. Similarly, after you press enter, the active cell moves on to the next row. Very subtle difference here, which you may notice, is that by default, numbers are right aligned to the cell, whereas text is left aligned. Now, by that I mean that the numbers start at the right hand side of the cell and go back, whereas text starts at the left hand side of the cell and goes forward. That's the default alignment for numbers and text. By default, text in a cell is left aligned, numbers are right aligned. Now we can override that, and in the next section when we look at formatting and editing the contents of our cells, we'll see how to do that. But just an important distinction to note when you're looking at entering text in. So that's all there is for this section, very short section. I just wanted to show you, quickly review entering data into a worksheet. You can enter data into any cell. It can be text, it can be numbers. After you've entered your data, you simply press the enter key, and the active cell will move on to the next row. And that's pretty much it. So in the next section, we're going to look back over formatting the contents of our cells. That's formatting, including things like fonts, colors, and sizes, and so on. So I'll see you in the next video.